Hello and welcome to the Emancipated Citizen podcast. This is going to be our second part of the Justice for Eden episode that we started with Robin, my lovely colleague from the Diaspora Association. In the last episode, she did talk about the engagement that she has been involved in Dublin, in London, and her experiences there, how the tragic story of Eden is reflected in those of so many of us here in diaspora, so many of us who have had to flee our countries, or even some of us who maybe haven't had the chance to do that and are suffering under the state's tyranny without an end in sight. I would suggest that everybody who is listening and maybe hasn't listened to the first part of this, listen to that one first. You would have a better idea, better context of what we're talking about in general. And of course, we are going to move on to more broad topics having to do with Saudi Arabia, refugee issues, religious freedom issues, LGBTQ issues, and so on. With me, by the way, is Ben Snow, my partner in this project.
Hello, hello.
And yeah, so it's just going to be the two of us today. There have been some scheduling difficulties with Don, and yeah, it's also not going to be a very long episode here. There are some thoughts that I felt needed to be finished, needed to be expounded upon, and so that being said, I will continue where we stopped at our last episode by reading where I read the goodbye letter that Eden has written. Right, I will go to my reaction to that letter. It was, like, by the way, also my first time reading that text in full. And so I thought reading showing you guys the live reaction that the letter really touched me and really resonated with me in so many ways, because yeah, in some ways I felt like I could have been in a similar situation, maybe not right now, but in other points in my life. And after that, we are going to have a short statement about this issue from our wonderful friend and previous guest on this podcast, Wajeeh Lion. That being said, let's play the statements. I hope our people get old. I hope we get to see our kids grow up and fight for us. I hope for trans rights worldwide. Goodbye.
Powerful and tragic, really.
Yeah, it is powerful and tragic, and it's something that it just gets to me. There's so much that's different, obviously, between our experiences. I don't know what it's like to be transgender in that context, to be demoralized, humiliated in that way. But for a period of my life, the content of this letter has been the content of my nightmares. The thing I see when I close my eyes to go to sleep. And it's an experience shared by a lot of others as well. The stakes are so high for people who think differently, people who identify differently, people who are out about it, people who talk about those things. The amount of pressure that's put on you to capitulate there, and sometimes even being afraid of being in that position of capitulation at a certain point. Or yeah, I mean there were several turns here and there where, if that had gone differently, if this had gone differently,
Yeah.
it's kind of, yeah, sobering in a way that you just can't take your freedom for granted. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it is sobering in a way that you can't take your freedom for granted. And and Eden wasn't the first to have this happen to her. She definitely won't be the last. You know, and we think about the stories of people like Dina Ali, and people who were so close to that point. Um, thinking about Sohail's story and the perfidious methods used to take people away from safety or any hope of safety, and imprison them, indoctrinate them, sometimes, yeah, abuse them, all of that. And I've talked lately to a person who has also been pressured to go back to Saudi Arabia and has been talked into a lot of things, and is very limited in what he can think and say, in contrast to the person he was before. I don't want to go into any detail on identity there, but it really gets to me emotionally. Um, and those things happen, right? And maybe death was the best thing that could happen to her at that point of complete and utter hopelessness. It's something you never want to say to someone or think about someone, and it's absolutely horrible,
Yeah.
I know, right? But
Yeah. I mean, with no possible way to get out. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's nothing more tragic than to see a person in a person's situation and have the only thought in your head, yeah, I completely understand why you want to end things, and it might be your best choice. This is just kind of an insight about certain things being worse than death, and yeah, it's probably not appropriate to philosophize about the ethics of suicide, um, or uh, anything of that sort right now. I think the last few years have shown a lot of positive progress in terms of advocacy for specifically the LGBT community in Saudi Arabia, but also Saudi refugees in general, free thinkers from Saudi Arabia in general. Um, we've had politicians, members of parliament, media personalities, uh, cover this, be active in this in a lot of our campaigns. Things that I've worked with, things that I've worked with Dawn on. Um, and yeah, although we're not doing anything here in Germany um, regarding Eden specifically at the moment, we might plan something in the future. Um, I do hope that this trend keeps on going because I have been seeing positive signs on social media. I've been seeing people posting pictures of themselves with pride flags in front of Saudi embassies all around the world. Um, it would be nice if over time we were able to coordinate those efforts more, and yeah, through that possibly have a political effect, foreign policy effect wherever we are. That our grievances become a constant worry of the Saudi authorities, that they always think twice about the backlash that we're gonna create whenever something like this happens. So yeah, I do hope that the people who have gone out continue doing their part, continue advocating for this, and I hope to be organizing more of this kind of thing in the future. Yeah, with that being said, we have already talked to Don about the demonstration that happened last Friday in Dublin, and parallel to that in London as well. We also invited the Saudi LGBT rights activist Wajeeh Lion, who today was not able to come live with us. You may remember him from, I believe, our all-time second episode on this podcast, where we also talked about LGBT rights in Saudi Arabia. And yeah, he sent us an audio statement here. So we're going to play you his statement, his perspective on this situation, and I hope it contributes to this.
I am sad to say that Eden's death is not the first, won't be the last of its kind. Many of the Saudi diaspora are facing luring and kidnapping on daily basis for a very long time. That's not to say that even in Saudi Arabia, members of the LGBT community are kidnapped and tortured and killed systematically. That's why a group of LGBTQ Saudis gathered in front of the Saudi embassy in London and demanded justice for Eden. I hope the world can stand up with us and demand justice for Eden, because her justice is our justice, and we have to learn to step up now before later. LGBT rights are coming to the Middle East, whether they like it or not. It just depends on how far they're willing to take the fight.
Well, I don't have any personal experience with such thing. I feel like everybody who's had the privilege of me of living in a country where we could be ourselves should do what we can to help people in Eden's situation, or in Zach's situation before he was able to go to Germany.
Yeah, and as we kind of pressed on in the last episode and made very clear, I would like to emphasize the point again that this, like, the reason that this is being highlighted is not because it's an isolated case or something that happens once in a while, or something that's very surprising in that sense. It's because it's reflective of a phenomenon that is so widespread, but the people affected usually don't have the opportunity to speak out or be spoken about, or have their stories go out. I mean, I know people back home who have gone through some really horrible things. And I hope if you look through my YouTube channel, through my activities in the past years, you will see whatever portion of that I could share with you. But stories of that nature are very, very common, and it's unfortunate that so many of them we just can't speak about for the protection of those involved. But one case that we now can speak about, and actually have been hesitant to speak about in the past because we didn't know where this individual stood in terms of directly criticizing the government and the monarchy, and we have withheld from even mentioning his name in our campaigns for that reason. So this individual is called Tariq bin Aziz. Tariq bin Aziz. He is an international law student who lives in the United States, from Saudi Arabia. Has been going back and forth between the United States and Saudi Arabia for years. He has been kind of involved with advocating for the rights of I guess gender non-conforming people, even LGBT people, gay people, and so on. At the same time, he has been extremely careful about not making any direct points of critique against the government, their actions, their imprisonments, their violations. Has made a very clear point of displaying himself very patriotically with the Saudi flag, with praise and prayers and that kind of thing towards your leaders and so on. And so when 2 years ago we had those pride events in front of the Saudi embassies, or was it last year? I think it was last year. We did get some news that this individual was disappeared or arrested, or he was just not publicly available anymore. He wasn't posting anything. Reports were being heard here and there that he was actually arrested, but we didn't know anything for sure. And one of the thoughts that people within our community had was what if what if it didn't happen the way we imagined it exactly, or maybe he was arrested, but given his history of being publicly at least very supportive of the regime and so on, he might take steps or be pushed to take steps to attack our credibility if we try to publicly campaign for his release, for him to no longer, if we take steps in his favor, basically, right? Recently, within the past few weeks, not only has this individual, Tariq bin Aziz, been released from prison, he has, as far as I can tell, gone back to his studies in the United States and has shown a much more decisive line against the Saudi state's laws and practices against the LGBT community. He has also, I think the first time now, been open about his gay identity, which before that he would not explicitly express, right? Because it is explicitly criminalized in Saudi Arabia. And so at this point, I think we can say that he has become a dissident or has been forced to become a dissident because his government has sent him a very clear statement that, hey, there is no place for you in this country. Fuck off, basically. You're not one of us. And this is something that we see happening with a lot of activists, human rights campaigners, people who clearly, like, they don't hate their countries, or they're not, they don't hate their own communities, cultures, countries, communities. They just want to work on the problems and injustices that we have there. And you saw this with Lujain al-Hadlul, for example, praying and praising the crown prince and so on, and then making certain statements about, hey, maybe look back into the file of prisoners of conscience, the women's rights issues, the driving issue, and so on. And they're taken, they're tortured, they're treated so brutally, they're smeared so so decidedly in the media and in the public sphere, that the only thing that's left for them is to take a combative stance against this state that is essentially taken everything away from them at that point, right? Let me see if I can pull up this one tweet from bin Aziz.
I think
Okay.
Pawpaw heard us talking about him earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, got it?
Yeah. So pulling up one tweet that actually it was a retweet from a different activist with the handle of Arab atheism. So this is a very encouraging sign about the way that those things are developing there. Anyway, let's go to the tweet. It says in Arabic, your criticism of things happening in your country, Saudi Arabia, does not mean that you are a traitor or a hater of your country. We simply criticize things in Saudi Arabia because we want to see them in the ranks of developed countries, and your criticism of Saudi Arabia is appropriate. I hope that one day will come when we will witness all the people of the country living comfortably in their own country without intrusion from others, right? This tweet very much resonated with me because it is something that I have been accused of or been portrayed as being like, just against our country or values or society or whatever. And I am not a person that thinks in those terms of being for or against the country, or like tribalism. Everyone's tribal in a certain way, sure, but I think it's very harmful. And it's something that that I've experienced. Like, I've been excluded from certain political contexts for refusing to take a stance of being like, I am against Israel and for Palestine, or vice versa, or this idea of being against a country as such, against a nation as such, is simply nonsensical to me, right? Because nobody can help where they're born, what passport they've been given, and in what context they came to this world. And we should be working towards a world that's more just, more inclusive, more habitable for everybody that is involved, within their relevant societies, right? I don't think it is enough to just say, let the Saudi state and the way that they want to run their country, do things the way that they want, and if you don't like it, just leave. No, that's like, you can't expect us all to leave everything behind and fuck off. You can't expect, countries like Germany or the United States to take on the responsibility of reintegrating all of us into new societies, essentially. Those structures in our societies do have to change in a fundamental way, and that is, if anything, only an expression of love and protection of one's country, and not of hostility, right? When I think of the word patriot, when I think of somebody who loves their country, the first thing that comes to my mind is Raif Badawi, or even Lujain al-Hatlul, right? Those are not people that the monarchy likes, but they have stood up for justice and human rights within their countries and lost almost everything for it, and lost like years of their lives for it, have experienced torture, have lost family members over it, right? And so I think we should update our understanding of what it means to love one's country, what it means to be a patriot, what it means to belong in a certain country, because I think the land belongs to all of us who have roots and residence and an affinity to this land. We have a right to live there without the threat of violence, and with the full freedom to intellectually unfold as we do.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And this absolutely does apply to other countries. Just because somebody in the U.S. or whatever other Western country is opposed to wars abroad does not make them disloyal.
Yeah. I think in the U.S., like, this kind of rhetoric is also something that yes, like liberals especially are faced with all the time, right? If you don't like it, just leave. Why do you hate your country? Why are you ungrateful for all the good things we have here, or whatever? And every country has good things and bad things. As much as there is a huge difference when it comes to things like civil rights and democratic representation and whatever. The fact remains that, like, even in a country like Saudi Arabia, even in a country like China or North Korea, there are things to appreciate about living in those countries, and love about about the people, the landscapes, the communities, whatever you may have there. But there, at the same time, there's always something to be improved, something to be criticized. I think if somebody is not brave enough, or doesn't have the intellectual honesty to look those problems in the face, it's kind of like if you have a child that has problems with, I don't know, drugs, overeating, drinking. Maybe they're just irresponsible with the way they go about their studies or whatever it is, right? If you tell them, oh, you're doing a good job all the time, everything you're doing, it's great, keep doing whatever you're doing, nobody's gonna stand against that or criticize you. You're not doing that child any favors, right? You like, there always needs to be a measure of accountability, of even hard criticism when things aren't going the right way, so that those actors can correct their course.
Indeed.
So this really ties into something else that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is the general PR campaign that the Saudi state has been spreading about life in Saudi Arabia, being in Saudi Arabia, doing business in Saudi Arabia. Especially, I work in the catering business where, there are a lot of, like, big hotels and like, I guess high society events and things like that, and the amount of representation that, Saudi advertising has been gaining lately is quite shocking, honestly. And I've even started seeing it with some of the colleagues, some of the associates that I have, even Western German people who, at first at least, find it difficult to understand my own position, my own story, why I came to this country, and isn't, like, for example, saying something like, isn't living there much easier, much better, and you don't know what background I came from, you don't know how the average person lives there, you don't know what my specific personal problems are. How can anybody make such a general statement about life being better in a country that not only you have never been to, but probably nobody you know has ever been to, because it's so isolated? And it's not even like, as might be a little bit, maybe it's not the best way to phrase it, but hearing this kind of thing from people like socialize in Pakistan or in, I guess, less developed Muslim majority countries, I guess with less political education.
Countries, in other words, that need to make sure they don't criticize Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia can retaliate against them if they do.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, but hearing this kind of thing from, like, Germans specifically is kind of alarming, honestly.
Yeah, you'd think they should realize that a country that only let women drive a few years ago is not a normal country, and, well, it's shocking how few people understand the concept of a resource curse, where a country with a huge amount of natural resources like Saudi Arabia has, the government gets free money and it needs to show no accountability to it, and doesn't have to show any accountability to their citizens, or, I guess in Saudi Arabia, citizens even the right word, isn't it? Subjects.
Yeah. I mean, citizen kind of has the implication of representation, of creating a citizenry, a body that is supposed to run the country, but this model of a nation consisting of citizens and steered by citizens is not true on any level within the state structure that we have. And another, I think, important part of it is, it's not only that the government isn't being held accountable because they're not as dependent on the tax revenue that they get from them. It's also that the economy works on a basis of favors, where if you have the right connections, if you have the right reputation, if you can get the right friends, then you can get more of the state's money flowing into your pockets. Right. So those things, like this lack of a dependency on tax income, this favor-based economy, the lack of a constitution or a system of accountability, creates kind of a perfect recipe, a perfect stick and carrot, so to speak, of despotism, of absolute dictatorship, where the people in charge really don't have to listen to the wishes of anyone else. This whole structure, and also an important part of the structure that I shouldn't forget, is this cooperation between the religious theocratic establishment, the Wahhabis, and the House of Saud, and this theocratic legitimization that they have from this elite clerical class in the country. All of this is, or seems to be, slowly breaking down in a way where first of all, the resources that are coming in are like kind of running out slowly. And then as a result of that, the citizenry is being taxed at an alarmingly increasing rate. When they do start to feel a little bit empowered about demanding their rights, this puts the state in a high pressure position, kind of like a cornered, panicked animal, where they go about quelling any kind of opposition much more brutally than they otherwise would, because, like, in a figurative sense, like, if you lose your carrots, you need a bigger stick to keep your subjects in line, right? And yeah, even this close relationship with the clerical establishment is dissolving, because this clerical establishment has been the main hindrance to the economic development of the country. Any kind of intellectual unfolding or research or free discussion has been very brutally stifled historically. And if foreign investors can't trust the state to at least, not make their money disappear, or have, like, as long as the world can see how the financial system works there, and there's a certain level of trust within institutions, then people are not going to be afraid of investing into the country. But a problem that you have when you do have an absolute monarchy, when you do have a system where one person is in charge and can change policies from today to tomorrow, and make gigantic sums of money simply disappear, is that nobody is going to feel safe there, either with their, like, in their bodies or in their property in any way, right? This is something that the state at a top level seems to be attempting to remedy in terms of reassuring certain people that things are more reliable in those terms, but I don't see any good reason why they would be, right? Especially for people within the country, the fact that members of the royal family itself, very high government officials, had a lot of assets taken away by Mohammed bin Salman.
And I'm guessing that's making all of them go squirrel away assets in other countries, which just makes things so much worse, really.
Basically. So there are people willing to invest in Saudi Arabia. There are people who are willing to work with the state. I think, I think those are. They could be like people within the caliber of, people like Richard Branson, other like incredibly powerful billionaires who, first of all, don't have the fear that if one of their investments here or there doesn't have good results, that then they still have a lot of other prospects to look to, and also the fact that those people are incredibly powerful, so powerful that even someone like Mohammed bin Salman wouldn't dare take steps against them. But yeah, on the other hand, this was kind of said about a lot of senior members of the royal family that this did happen to. I guess the main difference is that those people are citizens of foreign countries. Yeah. Just how much of a difference that makes, I guess history will show, right?
Yeah, and it's probably also worth mentioning that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, was given $2 billion from the Saudi Sovereign Royal Wealth Fund to manage and his investment company, which sure sounds like a bribe to me. So yeah, they've probably gotten Ben to use that tactic to get influence with the U.S. government, and that was like there.
Yeah, that was shortly after Trump's presidency, right? Like yes. During Trump's presidency, Jared Kushner was also very well known as being in the Saudis' pockets. He was there very often. He very openly had a lot of contact with the Saudi royal family. I don't know what the extent of the corruption that's going on there, and in how far the South and Jared Kushner and the Trump administration, the former administration of Donald Trump, that still exists kind of as a disintegrated political movement or political elite that is still very dangerous, I think. Right? Yeah, it's impossible to tell right now how deep this stuff goes, but I would say that I'm prepared to be surprised by what comes out, because I could very well imagine it's something huge.
Yeah, and at what point do we have to worry about state failure in Saudi Arabia, and what are the results of that going to be?
Yeah, state failure in Saudi Arabia is
it like, anything but inevitable if the oil money runs out?
I feel like, yeah, because unless they kind of willingly change a lot of the ways that they're running things. Like I was talking about before, the kind of social structure that has been holding things together for the last 100 years. This combination of money flowing in, oil being sold, the favor-based economy, people being quelled by being bribed essentially, and on the other hand, other people being severely punished. This carrot and stick apparatus that I was talking about before is kind of disintegrating, and this favor-based economy that used to work the way that it used to isn't working in the same way. You used to hear about a lot of people who, for example, there are people who went to Iran like decades ago, being invited to live back in Saudi Arabia, being given very large sums of money to live a much higher standard of life than they otherwise would dream of, and kind of having their loyalty, even though they are a very convinced and very committed Shia activists in some cases. In a lot of other cases, like this is something you'll see time and time again, where they take somebody to prison, they're tortured, they're humiliated, they're broken down, and then they're released and they're given an enormous amount of money, and just told to shut up, or it's like playing heaven and hell, right?
Yeah.
We can make your life hell, we can make your life heaven. If you don't fall in line, if you don't stay in line like we tell you, then we're gonna make your life hell again. So whether this way of dealing with dissent is going to remain sustainable in the long term, I don't think it's conceivable at all how it could be. Right. Look at Iran, for example, and how differently things could go about where they don't have those kinds of resources. It's funny, like in Saudi Arabia, they, like, when they imprison political dissidents, they imprison them for a long time, and a lot of the time, like, over their actual sentences. And they spare no expenses on this. They release them. They give a lot of the time they do finance them, and they ban them from traveling. Whereas in Iran, it's kind of the opposite, where and this is something we talked about with our episode with Fatima Masjidi. Listen to it after this one if you would like, where Iranian dissidents are arrested, a lot of the time serve a much shorter sentence than they're actually sentenced to, and then essentially expelled out of the country, or told, yeah, go somewhere else, we don't want you here, because they don't want them in the country, they can't afford to keep them in prison. And
it's also, Iran executes more people than per capita than anyone else in the world, which I don't know what to make of that combination.
Yeah, so if you want to look at the future of Saudi Arabia, I think the way things are in Iran, like right now, it is probably not far off.
You mean a state failure or revolution, or?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost wonder if that peace deal the Chinese were able to get Iran and Saudi Arabia to agree with was because they both realized at some level that they're facing state failure.
Yeah. What I would hope for, what I would push for, and all of that is, it's very difficult to build something from square one, right? And the government that we've had so far has put in a lot of efforts, so that no institutions could stay past, could out survive the government, so to say. So that if somehow the House of Saud is down, then everything goes into chaos, and there are those huge power vacuums that could very well lead to many decades of civil war. This is something that obviously nobody wants, and holds a lot of people back from even standing up against the way that things are right now, because it's also at the same time it's kind of a with us or against us approach, right? Where if you criticize the government on any small point, you're against the country as a whole. And if you're against the country, you're for its destruction, for civil war, and all of that. And this dissuades a lot of activism and a lot of speaking out. I think what I might hope for when it comes to historical analogs, you can look at the Russian Revolution or the French Revolution.
Or in the case of Saudi Arabia, possibly just the Kingdom of Congo in West Africa, whose economy became dependent on the slave trade.
Yeah, or on the other hand, you can get the British Revolution and the British Civil War, where at the end, the monarchy did come back, and but they were taught a lesson, basically, right? And like in the short term, that seems like a more stable path, because how many monarchies and dictators and republics, turmoil and terrors, and mass executions did France take to get to the point where it is now? Like from the very beginnings of the French Revolution, it was a very bloody process. Yeah, the English Civil War, the civil wars, I guess, were also brutal. Maybe not to the same extent. You might have a better background on this, Ben. What do you think? Like, what I'm trying to say, basically, just to finish the thought, is that the monarch was removed for a while in England, right? The monarchy was reinstated and does seem to still be stable, right? But there's also a parliamentary.
The monarch had a whole lot less power after they were reinstated, though.
Yeah, there's a parliamentary system. There's a representative government that is supposed to actually speak on behalf of the monarchy, but the monarchy doesn't really have any power to affect it. And technically, like within this constitutional monarchy, I believe the English monarch is allowed to dissolve parliament and act as a dictator. It's just that
if they did,
historically,
listen.
Historically, when monarchs tried this kind of thing, they were punished for it, right? There were revolutions. Some were even executed. I think you're better at this English history than I am when it comes to naming names and dates and all of that. But yeah, do you want to elaborate on this, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't also just the fight just between the king and parliament. There was also that there were even names for supporters of the king and parliament. The king's supporters are known as cavaliers. They're largely people with a military background. The stereotype was that they were all atheists. Obviously, that wasn't true in the 1600s. And the supporters and they'd all have their long hair. And then the supporters of Parliament were known as Roundheads because they'd mostly shave their heads or at least keep their hair short, and that they were all religious fanatics, which also wasn't consistently true. But yeah, it was very much a civil war between the different social groups within the country, and I imagine that if somebody showed up offering to trade weapons for prisoners, they probably could have gotten a slave trade leaving England at the time.
Yeah, no. And at the end, I think part of what I'm trying to express here is, I could see, at least in the long term, a bright future for our country. Not because of any specific nobility that I see in the social structure's character or anything like that. It's more about the character of humanity and the way that history tends to move forward and advance, with rising education, with people being more aware of their autonomy, of their rights, of the possibilities that they have, because 100 years ago people weren't completely aware that like how many different ways of living there are and what is possible in terms of how you want to live and how you want to follow your dreams and so on. But now a lot of people are, are living these lives and seeing something else on TV or on the internet or whatever, and are asking the legitimate questions of why can't I have that, right? Why is it? Yeah. So and so for that reason, I think we're very likely taking that trajectory in the long term. It's just I have no idea how that's going to go about, and whether now, like, what role the monarchy is going to have in the future, I think is largely up to them, and how willing to reform they are, because I don't think any of us want want to opt for a scenario that's going to lead to more people being killed and displaced and so on. Right?
Well,
things.
Except maybe some Islamists who think they'll be able to get their agenda achieved through that.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm talking about generally sane people who just want a livable and free and safe society. We're not unreasonable people, and whatever ideals that we might have about the form of government and the representative republic and so on, there's always room for some compromise when there's a greater good to be made there, to be had there. And so if the monarchy comes to a place where they grant the most basic of demands that we have as a people, and I'm not like I'm talking about the most basic things like a constitution, right? A parliament, an elected body of representatives, that kind of thing. If they're willing to work with us and recognize that they are under threat, that otherwise those things are going to have to advance through their exclusion, and possibly bloody ousting, right? Nobody ever gives power willingly out of a clear and good conscience, where I'm the king, I have the absolute power, but I think the people should have more of a voice. It's always more about, hey, if I don't give up this piece of my power, then they're gonna eat me alive. So I'd better compromise on that. And so, assuming that there are reasonable actors on both sides, I would hope that things can develop in a non-violent way to a parliamentary constitutional system that chips away at the power of the royal family piece by piece.
Yeah, but do you think there's a risk that the House of Saud is going to look at the Iranian Revolution and see that the Shah had made his government less restrictive, and then the revolution happened, and just completely take the wrong lesson from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Everything's possible. In how far that analysis is true, I I don't know. It's like the Shah made certain things more restrictive in a similar sense to how Mohammed bin Salman has been making, certain social freedoms less restricted when it comes to the way that, women, at least within certain milieus, are expected to dress and so on. And I suppose there were more concessions in terms of political freedoms by the Shah as well, right? Yeah, I don't know what lessons exactly are to be learned there. I am still kind of, I don't know. I don't know how that might go about. I think one very unfortunate thing that happened at the time is that they were giving way to a lot of the more populist elements, the more populist Islamist anti-democratic elements that were in motion during the Shah's time, talking about Khomeini and this kind of crowd. And that is, I interpret that as a result of a politically uneducated population being suddenly bombarded by a populist with dictatorial ambitions. You can make a very good comparison to the Weimar Republic and the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany during the late 1920s and 1930s, right, where this democratic conscience was not as deeply instilled in the people's spirit that they gave their support en masse. Not everyone, not even a majority of people, but enough people to make this happen, right? And get someone like Hitler in power. And this is something that, you can draw this common thread from Iran to like 1920s Germany to Egypt in like 2011, right, where they fight for democracy, they fight for representation, and then choose the first populist that promises to take all those freedoms away from them. And so I would hope that it might be a little bit different because, for one thing, political education is, I'm not confident that the political education is very good on second thought. I mean, there is a certain milieu of people that is very politically educated, mostly people who have studied abroad. But whether that's gonna push itself through within the wider society, I have no idea. I think what we can work on right now, and what we really have to work on right now in our country is, first of all, unite different ideological directions into pushing the government towards the constitution, towards an elected body of representatives. I think another very important, like also an important thing is spreading political education, what democracy actually is, what it means to be to stand up for democracy, to be a Democrat, and so on. What systems of or political ideologies are not compatible with a democratic constitution and basic structure, because that's also very important. And when people don't know that, when people aren't aware that certain things need to be excluded from the process, then those mistakes are like we're gonna have huge problems in that sense. And yeah, I think also a very important thing we need to work on right now, when it comes to serving the last 2 points I mentioned here, is having a well-funded, well-represented Saudi organization that specifically represents liberals, minorities, religious minorities, gender and sexual minorities, and so on. Right, because right now there is one political party in the Saudi diaspora. It's more of an organization. It operates kind of as a party. And it has a very rigid leadership structure. A lot of like their basic constitution is also questionable in the sense that there is some unclear language being used in the condemnation of possible consequences towards what is seen as being insulted to religion or blasphemy, and so I do have my concerns in terms of the development of religious freedom in our country, even if the current NGOs in diaspora are given this mantle of enlightening the people or rebuilding some of the institutions of our country. And so having a powerful, well-funded, well-represented liberal organization that represents LGBTQ rights and like non-Muslim rights and religious minority rights, even minority Muslims, standing up for democracy, secularism, and free speech, separation of religion and state. I think this is extremely important. I think it will add a very important dimension, a very important element to the intellectual landscape that is the Saudi diaspora at the moment. And if this resource is not created in the near future, I think that might be very dangerous for the further development of our society. And so this is something that I would very much like to work on. Something that I have worked on, especially with the certain subgroups within the Diaspora Association. We have had a certain amount of success in our lobbying campaigns. But I think that we need a more stable based and a more robust team that is more available, a more secure source of funding, and as it turns out, working in or running an NGO is incredibly demanding work that needs a lot of skill and a lot of expertise, and a number of people who really have experience in the field. Anybody can announce today or tomorrow, right, that they're launching this or that project in advocating for those groups and sort of an Instagram page or whatever. That might bring something, right? But when it comes to having the maximum political force that we want to have, I think this is going to take some time and a lot of calculation on our part on how this is going to be gone about. On that, on that thought, I also wanted to say in terms of perfecting our project and our activism, or improving things in such a way that that we reach more people and have more of a political force. We have been having some personal issues lately, where, like, I think within the last couple of months, both I and Ben have moved multiple times, right?
Well, I haven't moved multiple times. I'm moving in another month.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's not get into much detail about what's going on in our lives there, as it's not really important in this discussion. But the time that I think this podcast demands in terms of development, in terms of analysis, in terms of restructuring our episodes to reach a wider audience, in terms of having more robust marketing and being on more social platforms. The fact that I think the first 2 or 3 episodes of ours are on YouTube and the others still aren't on YouTube does say something about the state of our project right now. Doing those past episodes has been incredibly enlightening, incredibly fulfilling. We've gotten some amazing feedback from people who've listened to our shows, and we are really happy to know that people are being benefited from our content and are engaging with it. I think there's a lot of room for growth and improvement, though, and so for those reasons, we have decided that this is going to be the last episode of this phase of the project. In other words, we're not going to be releasing any more episodes for the foreseeable future, for the next 3 months at least. And in the meantime, we are going to work on more stable personal situations and developing this project more without this same temporal pressure that we've been working under lately, trying to hold a schedule that that we lately haven't been holding to. I know, we're sorry, and all of that. So look forward to listening to new episodes that we're gonna release in a few months. We do have a number of guests lined up, or that we hope will come on and talk to us. Some very interesting people working in areas like counseling for LGBTQ, atheists, ex-Muslim minority individuals, and one thing I forgot to mention, actually, for people who are struggling, positions like that of Eden or Tarek or so many people as I have mentioned, there are resources that you can access, at least when it comes to psychological support. You can contact me through asn.advice at atheistalliance.org.
Me at the same, but advocacy instead of advice.
Yeah, and
Zach probably checks his more reliably than I do, though.
I don't know if that's right, but yeah. Wait, is it asn.advice or advice.asn? Oh yeah, it's asn.advice. And then there's Free Hearts, Free Minds, the organization of Yasmin Mohammed, which also Jimmy Bangash, hopefully a future guest on this podcast as well, has recommended for people who are looking for resources. Faithless Hijabi is also a great resource. They don't have that many people working with them, but I have pointed people towards them, towards Zora K. Really lovely, wonderful, empathic people who are gonna do their best to make you feel accepted at the most basic human necessary level there. So just remember, you're not alone. There are always people on your side. Whether it's me, Ben, or our colleagues at the Atheist Support Network, other colleagues at Faithless Hijabi, Free Hearts, Free Minds, and I'm sure there are many others that I neglected to mention right now. But yeah, so we're taking a break. We're not leaving you forever. We're still reachable for sure. We would love to also be contacted by you either on or most conveniently on our Facebook page actually. If you have any feedback, any comments, any suggestions for improvements to this podcast, of course, you can also comment directly on whatever podcasting platform that you are using. And yeah, we're gonna really miss doing this for a bit, but we will need this break.
And
Ben,
in the meantime,
do you have any words to say on that?
Yeah, in the meantime, if you wanted to listen to me talking about something completely different, you can go check out Biosphere Solutions. I'm going to try to release my climate change episodes that have been sitting on my computer since the pandemic started, and hopefully moving on to some strategies to dealing with climate change and probably HIV or some other nasty disease in addition to malaria. And if you'd like to be a guest, either if you have something you'd like to talk about on there, or if you'd like to be a guest on the Emancipated Citizen podcast, feel free to reach out to us as well. I'm thinking we might want to cover Ethiopia and Armenia. Ethiopia has a civil war, and it looks like Armenia might be getting invaded again. And
I think there are a number of topics that are also lined up for us. Ethiopia and Armenia, the current situations happening there. I think the situation in Pakistan when it comes to religious freedom and secular people and secular activists, and how they live and what kind of solutions they advocate for. I think China is also a huge topic that we have not touched on so far, and we really need to. As far as the general civil rights situation goes, the right to freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and we can go more specifically about the culture, like multiple cultural genocides that are happening, whether it is about the Uyghurs or the Tibetans,
or just how the CCP treats their own people in general.
Exactly. So there's certainly a lot still to cover, and I'm sure if, as far as we get the engagement and as far as we're able to continue with this project, I think there is many years worth of content that can be covered, endless perspectives of brave, amazing activists fighting for their countries and their peoples and their freedoms, right? And so, yeah, with that being said, we will see you in a few months. Take care, everybody. Ben, would you like to say any final words to that? By the way, yeah, also I have translated Ben's first episode of the Biosphere Solutions podcast to German. So if you want to listen to it in German, you're very welcome to do that. It's about malaria and its effects on the world. The Biosphere Solutions podcast is admittedly a bit slow in terms of its release schedule, but for that, it is incredibly well, thoroughly researched and very well written. So there is no expense in terms of time and research spared in making that podcast. So I would highly recommend that you listen to the available content from the Biosphere Solutions podcast. In the meantime.
Aw, thanks, buddy.
So yeah, any last words, Ben, before we log out and say goodbye to our lovely audience for the next few months?
Yeah, hope to be able to talk to all of you again pretty soon. Hopefully, as I'm no longer putting out fires several times a week, I'll be able to get onto stuff more and better. But yeah, Wiederhören, everyone.
Auf Wiederhören. Take care, everybody. We'll see you in a few months.